up here basically near just about at the top of Ruffner Mountain. You got the top of the mountain is right here, and way up high above the Ruffner number 2 mine. And there is a trail that walks, comes by here, and I'm sure a lot of people may walk by here and take a look at this and wonder what it is. But these date back to about the 1890s, and what you got here are the remains of not one but 2 double sheave pillars, sheave actuators for the gravity plane system for the drift mines and the ore cars that came out of the drift mines. And you've got the rock foundation right here, and you've still got the steel rods right here that held the hoist into place. And there's 2 of them. And you can still see the iron rods that held it into place with the concrete or the rock foundation. And you've got the other foundation right here with one of the big iron rods right here. And there was one man, maybe 2, that operated these 2 hoists right here, and they were operated by gravity for the ore cars that were being pushed out of the drift mines by the miners, and would be put on these gravity plane cars. And what it was is 2 loaded cars would go down, and that action would force empty cars to come back up the side of the mountain. So there was no steam power, electricity, or anything like this. It was an ingenious method. But these are the remains of the double hoist operated foundations for the gravity plane system, the mining operation here at Ruffner number 2. And I'm sure back at 120 years ago, I'm sure they probably had a little building right here. I'm sure there was a wooden building here to keep them out of the elements of the rain and the wind and the snow. But this is all that remains today. Up here, when you walk up, there's no name or anything on this trail. And if you ever run across it, maybe you'll know what you'll get an idea of what it is. It's a nice piece of history sitting up here. So anyway, just thought I'd document this. All right. Here's a good example of a drift mine up here at Ruffner. And this was a tramway cut, and over there would have been another drift mine entrance, and would have just gone straight on through the finger here at the top, near the top of the mountain, and come out on the other side near Ruffner number 2. And of course, anything that wasn't red ore or anything, the shale and everything else, they just stacked up into these walls right here to make a retaining wall. And the little tramway rails would have been right here. It would have gone right in there. Now that drift mine's closed, so you can get in there, but you're not going to go anywhere. But at one time during the day, back in the 1880s, 1890s, this was a pretty big size. So, but these are layered. This is just one, and they're staggered going down in the middle of the ravine between the 2 fingers here, all the way, about 3/4 of the way down the mountain. You'll see it like this. It'll be terraced. It'll look like terracing all the way down. And whenever you see these big, large humps, in between they had the tramway rails. Some of them, the tramway rails were on top of the raised sections of earth right there. It just depends on where the drift mine, where the entrance was. So anyway, no trails up here, of course. So all right. Okay, up here at Ruffner in one of the deep ravines, and what you got here are the remains of a giant drift mine opening right here, and it's kind of hard to tell. It's easier to tell in the wintertime, but this right here is a built-up tramway bed in between the ravine that the miners and the engineers back in the day built this rail bed up in between the deep ravine. So when they were pulling ore cars out either by mule or either actually pushing them by hand back in the 1880s and 1890s, they would push them out, and they would either be transported, like I said, hauled by mule or actually pushed by hand over this raised tramway platform right here. And there are several more going up the ravine towards the top of the mountain. But this was all, you know, shale, other types of rock other than red iron ore. And so they just built this platform up. And there used to be a set of rail tracks on here, little narrow gauge ore cart rail tracks here. And they would, like I said, come out of that one big finger right there where they were mining, push it across, and it would they'd actually push it through, back underground, through the other finger, and out to the gravity operated plane system, which would take it down to the waiting ore cars, railroad ore cars. And this is what's left of a giant drift opening at one time. This must have just been a monster. And you see it's all caved in on itself. Of course, you know, after 120 years or so, yeah, it would. But this is where the opening would have been. The ore carts would have been pushed or pulled by mule, and they would have just gone straight on in, out maybe about 300 or 400 feet away up from underground, and out to a gravity plane system, which would have been transported it down to either the ore crusher or loading platform. But this is one of these little hidden things off the trails that you see up at Ruffner. So yeah, this raised rail platform right here, ore cart platform. So if you go around, there are some drift mines open, but you know, you can't really go back in them. You can pretty much just, you know, kind of look inside because they're all collapsed. And so, but this is about 3/4 of the way up the mountain here. So, okay. Up here on Ruffner Mountain, high up above the Ruffner number 4 mine site. And what you got here is a beautifully preserved, about 130-year-old tramway wall, retaining wall. Goes pretty much good way down the mountain. And this right here was the tramway for the ore carts. The sheave pillar foundation is still up there. Still has the a lot of the iron bars attached up there that held onto the small hoist. And what you got here are the remains of drift mine openings that actually went all the way underneath what we call the finger out into the other ravine. And when these were opened back in the day in the 1880s, 1890s, the miners would push the ore carts out, and there would be a rail cart platform where they would push the small ore carts onto, and they would just be transported by a gravity plane system with the hoist operator all the way down to the loading dock. So of course all the drift mines up here have long since collapsed, but this retaining wall is absolutely one of a kind up here at Ruffner. There's no trails or anything to get up here. So you got to do a little exploring. But anyway, the rock walls are still in place after 120, maybe 130 years ago. So, all right. Okay, moving a little bit further on down the mountain, and here's a continuation of the rock retaining wall, the tramway that would have gone right down here, would have kept going. Here's some more rock walls the miners made for the ore carts coming out. That's a collapsed tramway. And one of the most interesting finds up here at Ruffner, if you wonder about, you know, the date of this, of the mining operations up here, here's a rare find. In 1898, a miner scratched his initials with the year 1898, E.F. Hill, right there in front of a drift mine. And we're high up here on the mountain, and this miner just one day just took out probably a pickaxe, chisel, and just chiseled in 1898 with his initials E.F. Hill. So if anybody was wondering about the dates of these mining operations, well, there you go. And like I said, these drift mines were separated sometimes 50, 60 feet apart, sometimes even closer. But there's the rock retaining wall, and this would have been a drift mine, and the miner just put his initials in right there. So you don't see that every day. So incredible piece of history up here at Ruffner Mountain. So just making my way on down the mountain here. There's a lot more. And this is just one ravine out of many. So, and over there on the other side of the ridge, there's a lot more drift mines. So, all right. Okay, make one little last video right here. So the tramway line, rail line would have been right here, coming down the mountain, and would have just continued straight on down the mountain to the ore loading dock, which would have been way down there. And all up over here are drift mines. You know, they're all collapsed and everything. But you can see the rock retaining walls, everything the miners had made around the drift mines, and the ore carts would have just been, like I said, pushed right out onto an ore cart platform attached to a steel cable, a hoist, and would have just lowered the ore carts, the full ore carts, all the way to the bottom. But anyway, high up over there, way on the other side of that ravine, going up that other finger, is a whole nother series of drift mines. So, all right.